Okay. Okay. Welcome, Prachi. Uh, Welcome, and I hope all our students and are joining. So we have even a class like over there. So this would be live also on YouTube, and there will be a class also. So students are listening from there also. Okay. So Soumya.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Over to
Yeah.
you, Soumya.
Thank you, ma'am. A feminist is anyone who recognizes equality and full humanity of women and men. A very good morning to everyone present here, Professor Prachi Patil, our principal, Professor Pramod Herode, and all professors and listeners. Today we meet for the second session of the three-day lecture series organized by Dr. Ambedkar College of Law, Aurangabad, on the occasion of the birth anniversary of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. We are delighted to have Professor Prachi Patil as the speaker and guest for the second session of the lecture series, who will be speaking on reclaiming Dr. Ambedkar within the feminist legacy. Professor Prachi Patil is currently an assistant professor of sociology at the Oro University, Surat. She has completed her MA in social work from Tata Institution of Social Sciences, Mumbai, and she pursued and completed her PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. I would now request Professor Prachi Patil to shower us with her knowledge.
Thank you, Soumya. Before I begin, I
Ma'am,
would
your voice is
formally
not
like.
audible.
Am I not audible? Now?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
is.
Okay. So before I begin, I would like to thank Dr. Ambedkar College of Law and the organizers, Professor Praful Telkote, Dr. Purva, Dr. Gatha. Thank you very much for inviting me. And before I begin, I would pay my respects to Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar and his two teachers, Mahatma Jyotirao Phule and Kranti Jyoti Savitribai Phule. So, if Soumya has already told the title of my talk, and I have around 40-45 minutes, आणि मी मिक्स बोलणार इंग्लिश हिंदी मराठी
Yeah.
इंग्लिश पण सोपीच ठेवणार आहे नॉट व्हेरी कॉम्प्लेक्स तर माझ्या टॉकचं टायटल आहे रिक्लेमिंग डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर विदिन द फेमिनिस्ट लेगसी. नाउ वाय आय हॅव चोजन दिस म्हणजे एकतर आहे की आपण वी नो दॅट डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर वॉज अ सोशल रिफॉर्मर, ही वॉज अ स्टेट्समॅन अँड ही वॉज अ इंडियन लॉ मेकर. And he fought for the rights of one and all, especially he fought for the rights of women, he fought for the rights of dalits and workers, that is the laborers, right? So when Baba Sahib was living, it was a colonial period or colonial time in India, and at the same time, while Baba Sahib had started his anti-caste movement, there was also a broader nationalist struggle that was happening in India. So Baba Sahib made a very radical statement. He had said, I measure the progress of a community by the degree of progress which women have achieved. Basically, it is a very popular statement that he had made की एका समाजाची प्रगती कशी झाली आहे, मी त्याचं मापदंड कसं बघतो, मी बघतो की त्या समाजातल्या महिला ज्या आहेत त्या किती प्रगतिशील आहेत किंवा त्यांना किती अधिकार दिलेले आहेत. तर हा जो स्टेटमेंट त्यांनी मांडला होता तो खूप एक रॅडिकल स्टेटमेंट होता आणि बाबासाहेबांनी हा स्टेटमेंट त्यावेळी दिला होता जेव्हा विमेन्स इश्यूज जे होते, विमेन्स issues of rights, they were being marginalized as secondary to the national freedom struggle. At that time there was this popular notion. What was the popular notion? कि अगर हमें ज्यादा concentrate करना चाहिए freedom struggle पे, we should, our first aim should be to get independence from the British. And in this it was believed that once all Indians get independence, it will eventually mean that all the problems or issues that Indian women are facing, they will also eventually get ended. However, Baba Sahib was not of the same opinion. Rather, he positioned women at the forefront of change within the Indian society. He stated that once women's liberation or women's independence is achieved, it will automatically liberate all Indians. So we can see the contradiction where larger free social reformers from the mainstream society were saying that once all Indians are free, they get independence, women's issues will also be sorted out. But Baba Sahib said once women's liberation is sorted out, only then all Indians will be liberated. So, Baba Sahib realized two fundamental aspects of women's oppression. Firstly, the survival of caste society is anchored in women's oppression. He said that women's oppression in Indian society, specifically within the Hindu society, occurs because of caste, right? And caste is based and caste survives on the oppression of women. If there is no oppression on women, then caste itself will not survive. Second observation that he made, or the position that he took, is that this oppression of women is graded in its dealings of violence. So first of all, he gives this category of Indian women. Generally, when we talk about Indian women, we think Indian women are a single category. But Baba Sahib long back had stated that Indian women are not a single category. Rather, they are a homogeneous group. So we have Indian women of different castes, different subcastes, different classes, different educational backgrounds. Then there is region, that is geography, then there is religion, ethnicity. So Indian women is not a single monolithic category, is what Baba Sahib emphasized. And then he said the kind of caste oppression that happens does not happen equally on all women. The oppression and violence that happens on women on the account of caste, it is actually a graded violence. So there is a grading. The way in which Brahmin women will experience violence, patriarchy, and oppression of caste is different from the way in which Dalit women or Shudra women, or what we now say OBC women, experience this, right? So he talked about this gradation of violence that happens. Now, this kind of understanding, it came very late to the post colonial इंडियन फेमिनिस्ट मुवमेंट, जी स्त्रीवादी चळवळ होत होती आणि जी अजूनही होत आहे, त्याच्यात तुम्ही बघा बाबासाहेबांचा उल्लेख किंवा त्यांच्या कामाचा उल्लेख हे जास्त करून अर्ली फेमिनिस्ट लिटरेचर मध्ये तुम्हाला दिसून येणार नाहीये. खूप पॉप्युलर बुक आहे राधा कुमारची, अँड त्या बुकचं टायटल आहे हिस्ट्री ऑफ डुईंग, and it is basically the history of women's movement in India, or women's right struggle in India. And it is a 1 or 2 volume book, so खूप heavy book आहे, but it hardly mentions the contribution of Baba Sahib Ambedkar anywhere in the book. So maybe new edition of the book has included the contributions of Baba Sahib Ambedkar and the struggles of Dalit women, but the original edition did not have any mention as such of Baba Sahib Ambedkar. So he was basically wiped out from the feminist movement of India, right? Whereas he was a social reformer who emphasized strongly and took a very strong position for women's rights throughout his life. And throughout his life, within politics, within his social his capacity as a social reformer, or within his capacity as a law maker, whenever he held any government position, he made sure that he fought and stood for the rights of women, and in that sense all women, not just Dalit women as such. Generally what happens is Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar, when people say the name, he gets reduced as leader of the Dalits, but that is not so. Rather, he fought equally for every individual and every Indian, and specifically for all the women of all castes and all religions. Now, Baba Sahib's strategies for women's liberation were rooted in the understanding that graded patriarchy oppresses women according to their location in the caste system. His strategies, when we see, can be located in two spheres, namely social sphere and legal sphere. So Baba Saheb worked to reconstruct the society, to change the society, and he also worked at in the legal sphere, so that the changes that he is introducing in society with help of the social movement, they are safeguarded by certain laws and regulations, right? As the oppression of Dalit women and Hindu women is differently informed by graded patriarchy, Baba Sahib designed distinct strategies for both these groups of women. So, for instance, if you see, Baba Sahib worked for the upliftment of all kind of women, Hindu women, then Dalit women, OBC women. He worked for even he addressed the sex workers, one category which not many social reformers wanted to work with at that time. Baba Sahib addressed even the sex workers, and he gave them certain solutions to better their life, right? So on the one hand, Baba Sahib appealed to women who were forced into sex trade to find solution or solace in married life. So he gave the suggestion to those women, especially Mahar women, who were forced into prostitution because of the caste system, right? So he gave them the solution that you should leave this profession, and you should enter matrimony, right? You should enter marriages. On the other hand, he advised Dalit women who were married and who were housewives or householders. He suggested to them, he encouraged them to participate in the movement, in the anti-caste movement, and he placed a great importance on these women for removing untouchability, right? Lastly, he sought legal remedies for Hindu women through the Hindu Code Bill. So we all know that Baba Sahib really worked hard on this Hindu Code Bill, and we will also discuss it later in this lecture. The colonial period was a significant time in creating a legal space for women as well as the erstwhile untouchables, where rights could be lawfully demanded from the British. Where we see earlier movements against untouchability, like the movements of bhakti movement that happened during the medieval era, right, during the Mughal era. There were also some movements that were happening against caste. We see Mirabai and we see other various saints. This bhakti movement appealed for a change in morality and values, but it did not bring in any structural systematic change with the help of laws. While during the British rule, a space was opened where legal reforms could be introduced, and Baba Sahib consciously availed the space for furthering the rights of women and Dalits. Now, if we see, अगर हम historically बाबा साहब के इरा को एनालाइज करते हैं, उसके बारे में क्रिटिकली देखते हैं, तो हम देखते हैं कि बाबा साहब के साथ और भी बहुत सारे सोशल रिफॉर्मर्स थे जो विमेन्स लिबरेशन, नारी मुक्ति के लिए काम कर रहे थे उस वक्त, जो नेशनल स्ट्रगल का मूवमेंट था. बट उन सबको अगर आप बाबा साहब से कंपेयर करोगे, तो बाबा साहब इमर्जेस एज अ वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग एडवोकेट ऑफ विमेन्स राइट्स of his own time. So as compared to what other social reformers were saying and suggesting for women's rights, Baba Sahib was much ahead of his own time, right? So, and an important aspect of his critique was his critique of the Hindu religion and locating religion as a source of Hindu women's degradation. So we see that, while Gandhiji, he spoke, when he talked about women's empowerment or women's rights, he evoked the images of Sita, Damayanti, and Draupadi to organize women in the national movement. On the other hand, we see that Baba Sahib is actually critiquing and challenging the Hindu religion, and he's saying that he's telling Hindu women that the reason why you are oppressed is your own religion. So he gives a very, very strong critique of Hindu religion. Baba Sahib's understanding is built from the works of Jyotiba Phule and Savitri Bai Phule, who again had a very strong critique of caste and Hinduism. Now, before talking more, what is important is to understand a very important text that Baba Saheb had written and presented. And the name of the text is Castes in India. So, take a note, it is not caste in India, but it is castes in India, because we have many castes and then many subcastes within these castes. So, Baba Saheb is actually in 1916 he wrote this paper. ज्यादा बड़ा पेपर नहीं है, अराउंड 30-40 पेजेस का पेपर है. एंड ही रोट दिस पेपर, कास्ट्स इन इंडिया, देयर मैकेनिज्म्स, देयर जेनेसिस एंड डेवलपमेंट. सो बेसिकली इस 30-40 पेजेस ऑफ पेपर में बाबा साहब देख रहे हैं कि कास्ट्स क्या है, उनके बनने के तरीके क्या है, व्हाट इज द मैकेनिज्म, हाउ डू दे फंक्शन, what is their origin, and how were they developed, and how are they still developing. So he presented this paper in Columbia University in 1916, and in 1917 this paper was published in a very renowned journal by the name of Indian Antiquary, and this is a journal in anthropology and sociology. So we also know that Baba Saheb Ambedkar is not just a lawmaker, but a very profound sociologist. So then, what does Baba Sahib do in this text? He basically talks about patriarchy, and he talks about Brahminical patriarchy. So in this, he gives certain characteristic of caste. He says that caste को कैसे समझे? तो कास्ट को समझने के लिए उन्होंने एक चीफ की कैरेक्टरिस्टिक दिया, और वो कैरेक्टरिस्टिक क्या है? उन्होंने कहा एंडोगमी इज a chief characteristic of caste. Now, what is endogamy? Endogamy is when you marry within your own social group. तो आप इंडिया में देखते हैं कि विद इन कास्ट मैरी करने के लिए बहुत ज्यादा एम्फोसिस होता है, और विद इन कास्ट नहीं, उसमें भी आपको अपने ही एरिया में सब कास्ट में शादी करनी होती है ना. सो दैट इज एंडोगमी. सो बाबा साहब सेड दैट the chief characteristic feature of caste system is endogamy, and using this aspect he analyzed three phenomena that were happening in Indian society at that time during the colonial time. What was happening? There was this practice of sati. Then secondly, there was this practice of enforced widowhood, and thirdly there was this practice of early गर्ल चाइल्ड मैरिज. एंड ये जो प्रैक्टिस है अर्ली गर्ल चाइल्ड मैरिज, आप देखोगे कि आज भी बहुत सारे एरियाज में, इंटीरियर रूरल एरियाज में भी ये प्रैक्टिस चलती है. सो ही एक्सप्लेन्ड दीज थ्री प्रैक्टिसेस विथ द हेल्प ऑफ caste system, and especially this feature of endogamy. So what did he say, right? So while at that time his contemporaries had concentrated on how these social practices were evil, and or why they were important, Baba Sahib ventured to investigate the origins of these three practices, and in the due course he found that it is the mechanism of endogamy within caste which gives birth to these practices. So what he says, and he explains this through the concept of the surplus woman and the surplus man. So what Baba Sahib is saying that कास्ट का स्पेसिफिक फीचर है कि अपनी ही जाति में, अपनी ही सब कास्ट में शादी करनी होती है. अब अगर अपनी ही सब कास्ट में शादी करनी होती है तो जो लड़की है और लड़का है वो विद इन कास्ट ही ढूंढने होते हैं, राइट. अब उस वक्त चाइल्ड मैरिज भी जनरली होती थी. अब अगर कोई किसी के हस्बैंड गुजर जाते हैं या किसी की बीवी गुजर जाती है, राइट, उस वक्त कॉलोनियल टाइम, उस पीरियड में मोर्टेलिटी रेट इंडिया का बहुत हाई था. एंड आप देखेंगे कि लाइफ स्पैन जो थी वो ज्यादा लंबी नहीं थी. अब हम लोग आराम से 70 तक तो सब उम्मीद करते हैं कि 70 साल तक आसानी से जिए. मेडिकल जो फील्ड है वो भी अच्छे से एडवांस हुआ है, बट उस टाइम पे दिस वाज नॉट द केस, राइट. सो मोर्टेलिटी वाज हाई. Then what used to happen? There used to be a problem of the surplus woman and the surplus man. Who was the surplus woman? Those women who were widows, Baba Sahib calls them as surplus women. So he says that to resolve the issue or problem of the surplus woman, three practices came into being. One is what to do with the widows, right? If the widows are remarried, then what would happen to the girls who are actually of the age of marrying? Who will they find? Which boy will they find for marriage? So there will be a shortage in the market, marriage market, for marriageable girls of that particular caste to find grooms, if widowed girls of the caste are also competing with them to finding grooms, right? So these surplus women had to be somehow managed, and for managing these women, Baba Sahib says the Hindu society came up with three practices. One is, he says, the surplus woman was controlled by the practice of sati. Sati में क्या होता था? This practice of sati used to largely happen among the Brahmins, right? Generally, अगर आप देखो जो वर्क शूद्रा कास्ट थे, या जो सर्विस कास्ट थे, या जो एक्स अनटचेबल कास्ट थे, उनमें रीमैरिज आसानी से हो जाता था, बट इट वाज दी ब्राह्मण कास्ट in which remarriage was not allowed for women specifically. For men it was allowed. So in certain areas, sati as a practice came about to control these surplus women. And what was sati? एक practice होती थी जहां पे अगर एक मैरिड अगर एक औरत है, उसका पति अगर गुजर गया, तो उस औरत को पति के साथ ही जला देते थे। तो उसका किस्सा वहीं पे खत्म हो जाता था ना। ये किस्म की जो प्रथाएं थी, ज्यादातर वेस्ट बंगाल में आपको देखने को मिलेंगी। महाराष्ट्र या इस साइड में ये प्रथा ज्यादा देखने को नहीं मिलती थी, क्योंकि ये प्रथा, इफ वी सी, इट इज एक इनह्यूमन प्रथा है, एंड इट इज नॉट ऑल्सो वेरी प्रैक्टिकल वे ऑफ डीलिंग विद द कैटेगरी ऑफ द सरप्लस वुमन. So how so what is the other way that this category of surplus women were dealt with? Then Baba Sahib says ki another way of dealing with the surplus women was enforced widowhood. Now, what was enforced widowhood? Once a woman loses her husband, she would be forced to undergo for the lifetime. She would be experiencing widowhood. मतलब उन्हें जिंदगी भर विधवा बन के रहना है, उन्हें वापस दोबारा शादी नहीं करनी. Which is also, if you say, it is fine, but the kind of treatment that was given to these women, right? What was the treatment that was given to these women? There used to be a process in which these women were made ugly for the society. तो उनके बाल जो हैं वो पूरे निकाल दिए जाते थे, शेव कर दिए जाते थे, उन्हें घर में किसी कोने में रखा जाता था. उनके खाने की जो चीजें हैं, उनकी पहनने की जो चीजें हैं, बहुत ही लिमिटेड होती थी. उनकी थाली और उनके जो यूटेंसिल्स थे वो अलग रखे जाते थे. उन्हें घर के बाकी प्रोग्राम्स में शामिल होने की अनुमति नहीं थी. खाने में भी आप देखेंगे कि दे वर नॉट अलाउड टू हैव what everyone else in the house was having. So for instance, हम लोग डेली के खाने में क्या खाते हैं? दाल चावल है, तला हुआ खाना है, पापड़, अचार, प्याज या कुछ मीठा हुआ. मगर ये जो विधवाएं थी, इनका खाना बहुत ही सिंपल खाना होता था, जिसमें कोई मसाला नहीं होना चाहिए, कोई तली हुई चीज नहीं, ज्यादातर मीठा भी नहीं दिया जाता था. मान्यता ये थी कि कुछ खाने के पदार्थ ऐसे होते हैं कि वो जो सेक्सुअलिटी है उसको अराउज करते हैं. इसीलिए ये जो विमेन थी, जो विडोज थी उस वक्त, उनका खाना भी बहुत ही साधारण हुआ करता था. तो उनकी हालत जो थी वो सही नहीं थी. सो और फिर बाबा साहब कहते हैं कि ये जो प्रैक्टिस थी वो ज्यादा चलन में आने लगी, एनफोर्स्ड विडोहुड की. देन ही सेज दैट there is after this there was also another challenge that came up for how to manage this problem of the surplus woman. That is, we see it gets reflected in the arrangement where girls are married off very young in the society, right? So I'll read some part of this paper. Enforced widowhood was a practice of making the widow unattractive to men. It entailed the control of their sexuality through harsher controls like shaving off their heads and imposing restrictions on food, clothes, sleep, their movement, and their intermingling with other people in the society. Now, in explaining the case of the surplus man, Baba Sahib draws attention to the fact that, so one question will come, so if this kind of treatment is given to the widows, what happens if a man loses his wife, right? He also becomes a widower. So what happens to this surplus man? Is he also given the same kind of treatment that is received by these widowed women? So then Baba Sahib explains, no, the widowed man is not given the same kind of treatment. Rather, because he draws this attention that in every society, आप कहीं भी चले जाइए, आप आज भी अमेरिका में चले जाइए, वहां पे भी एक पितृ सत्ता है जहां पे आदमी जो है उनका जो सोसाइटी में स्टेटस है वो विमेन से सुपीरियर स्टेटस है, और ये दुनिया के हर सोसाइटी में आपको मिलेगा. सो बाबा साहब से क्योंकि वैसे भी आदमियों का स्टेटस विमेन से सुपीरियर था, इसीलिए जो ट्रीटमेंट सरप्लस विमेन को दी जा रही थी वही ट्रीटमेंट सरप्लस मेन को नहीं दी जा सकती थी. बाबा साहब कहते हैं कि सरप्लस मेन जो थे उनकी दोबारा शादी की जा सकती थी. दे वर अलाउड टू रीमैरी. It was not possible for disposing of the surplus man by burning him on his wife's pyre. जैसे बहुत लोग कहते हैं कि सती है तो सता क्यों नहीं, ये sarcastically कहते हैं. But the reason is क्योंकि the man as is an asset, was considered as an asset to the group, and therefore it was not possible to dispose him of the way widows were disposed of. So there were two ways to grapple with this problem. First, by imposing the ideal of celibacy on the widower, and second, by remarrying the widower. So one option Baba Sahib says कि फिर ये जो surplus man है उसको कैसे कंट्रोल किया जाए. दो ऑप्शंस थे. एक तो उन पर सेलेबसी या जो ब्रह्मचार्य होता है उसे फोर्स किया जाए कि he should remain single and he should act as a ब्रह्मचारी. दूसरा ऑप्शन ये था कि उनकी दोबारा शादी कर दी जाए, राइट. अगर ये जो विडोवर्स है इनकी दोबारा शादी होती है तो फिर वही सवाल आता है कि जो मेन है, जो शादीशुदा, जो मैरिजेबल एज के हैं, जो एलिजिबल हैं, उन्हें लड़कियां कहां से मिलेंगी. So this creates another problem for the Hindu society. Then Baba Sahib says to solve this problem, what happens is that the bride for the remarriage is recruited from the ranks of those who are not of the marriageable age as of now. So you see, early girl child marriage, girls would get married if a girl is born within 1 or 2 years. Her marriage was fixed by her family, and the marriage would generally be fixed with somebody who's much elder to her, right? So by the age of 7 or 8, this girl was sent was married off, and by the before even puberty, at that time there was this problem that before puberty only the girl would be introduced to sexual intercourse, right? And girl marriage, child marriage was, especially for girls, a big problem during the colonial times, and there were a large number of deaths happening of girl childs because they got married early, or they had to enter sexual relations with their husband at a very early age where their body was not developed. If suppose they had touched the age of puberty and they got pregnant, a lot of young girls died during the process of pregnancy or delivery. So we had a lot of deaths of young girls, and that is why you see that there was a separate movement for the abolition of child marriages, because the death rate of girls was very high at that time, right? So in this same paper, Castes in India, Baba Sahib explains something very strongly. He says women are the gateway of the caste system. He says that caste system जो है within the Hindu society वो actually women के basis पे ही खड़ी है, right? So caste women are actually taking the burden of the caste system to keep the caste system alive. Now it becomes then necessary to draw relational analysis of Baba Sahib's explanation of sati and child marriage in contemporary time. So आप अगर देखोगे बस recently 1987 में 32 साल पहले 1987 में राजस्थान में एक महिला थी जिसका नाम था रूप कंवर, और वो देवराला गांव की महिला थी, और करीब 17-18 साल की महिला थी, शादीशुदा महिला थी. जब उसका हस्बैंड गुजर गया तो रूप कंवर को सती अब सती चढ़ाया गया. So in 1987, you see, we got freedom in independence in 1947, and in 1987, just 40 years later, we have a case which is very barbaric of sati, where there is this young girl, 17, 18 years, and she is forced to commit sati. She is forced to burn herself on the pyre of her dead husband. Now, when this episode happened, it actually created a lot of tension within the society, especially in the north, right? So there were feminist groups who protested this sati. Now, this sati was also, an advertisement was given for this sati of Roop Kamar, where it was published that she is going to take sati on so and so date in at so and so time. So a lot of groups in support of the sati and against the sati. Who were against the sati? Largely women groups were against this practice of sati. They had reached this village of Devrala, and police had also reached. Now, the end result is that finally Roop Kaur was forced to take sati, and there was a lot of tension that was happening, a lot of violence. There was a possibility of violence also happening, so a lot of police was also recruited there. But despite everything, Roop Kaur was forced to take sati. Now, when we see this kind of instances happening even after independence, it shakes our belief in our belief in our independence. Are we really, as a society, have we got independence, or are we still stuck back in those old kind of traditions which are detrimental to women as well as to the broader society? At that time, the feminists, during the episode of Roop Kamar's Sati, feminist groups were attacked by right wing forces and orthodox women's groups, which considered the matter of Roop Kamar's Sati as a personal choice. So many groups said कि Roop Kamar की personal choice है, उसे ये सती लेने दो. कुछ जो स्त्रीवादी संगठन थी, उन्होंने कहा कि 17-18 साल की लड़की है, आप हमें उससे बात करने दो, हमें उसे कन्विंस करने दो, फिर देखा जाएगा. लेकिन किसी से, रूप कौर को किसी से बातचीत करने का मौका नहीं दिया गया था. Now you see, after the sati that was committed by Roop Kaur, there was a proliferation. A lot of goddess temple, sati temples started to be erected across India, and especially the north, that is Rajasthan. Now we again then question that, are we living in a democratic India or not? Besides that, then when Baba Sahib is saying that caste is actually hinged on the backbone of women, caste is actually a structure, a system which survives by oppressing women, and endogamy is very, very necessary or crucial feature of the caste system. So अगर आप आज भी न्यूज़पेपर उठाते हो या न्यूज़ चैनल देखते हो, हफ्ते में एक बार आपको एक खबर आएगी कि इंटरकास्ट मैरिज के लिए किसी कपल को मारा गया, पीटा गया, या उनकी जान ले ली गई, राइट? सो और इसे आप लॉ के स्टूडेंट्स हो, इसे कस्टोडियल किलिंग्स करके नाम दिया गया है एक सोशियोलॉजिस्ट ने, उमा चक्रवर्ती जो है. तो वो कस्टोडियल किलिंग्स क्या है? जब एक कपल अपने पेरेंट्स की कस्टडी में होते हैं, या उनमें से कोई एक स्पाउस पेरेंट्स की कस्टडी में होता है और मारा जाता है, तो उसे कस्टोडियल किलिंग्स करके उमा चक्रवर्ती ने नाम दिया गया है. अब ये जो कास्ट किलिंग्स होती हैं इन द नेम ऑफ इंटरकास्ट मैरिजेस, कैन प्रवीण म्यूट हिज माइक? देयर इज अ बिट ऑफ डिस्टर्बेंस. If there are questions, we'll take it after the talk. So these caste killings that happen, जिसे custodial killings भी दिया गया है because of intercaste or interfaith marriages, basically Baba Sahib argued that it is because of the system of endogamy which exists in maintaining the caste system, right? So these caste killings are actually, if you see, these are anxieties, and these anxieties are arising from exogamous marriages. If men and women in Indian society, in the caste Hindu society, and if you see now, caste is not just a feature of Hinduism, but it is also extended into Christianity. It is also extended. You will find it among the Muslims. You will find it among the Christians in India also, and they also strictly follow caste system. So Baba Sahib said that if we take his analysis of caste being endogamy being the main feature of caste, we can understand why these custodial killings or killings of intercaste couples are happening. Because if intercaste marriages keep on happening, then what will happen to caste? Because caste is actually a closed kind of a group, right? Where marriages happen within the same caste, right? And castes, each caste, it exists if the marriages are happening within the same caste. If intercaste marriages happen, then the caste, each caste will become a hybrid, in sense a hybrid caste, and it will actually compromise the structure of caste, right? So there are four caste structure of caste. The highest are the Brahmins, then the Kshatriyas, then the Vaishyas, then the Shudras, and the fifth, that is the outcasts, are the Dalits, right? So endogamy or marriage within caste, it makes sure that caste as a structure and a system is surviving, and intercaste marriages actually threaten the existence of the caste system, right? So Baba Sahib argued that the superimposition of endogamy on exogamy means the creation of caste. When forcing people to marry, individuals to marry within their own social group and not marry, finding partners outside their social group, leads to the creation of caste. The freedom to choose one's life partner results in the breakdown of the caste system and the system of endogamy, and therefore it is a threat to the survival of the caste system. So you see, again, how through caste women's oppression is happening. One is that they do not have the right to choose their own partner. In earlier colonial period, there was the problem of sati, there was the problem of enforced widowhood, and also the issue of early girl child marriage, which we even see existing today. Now, in contemporary times, if we apply Baba Sahib's analysis to this case of dowry, आज भी अगर आप न्यूज़पेपर खोल के देखोगे, डाउरी के केसेस अक्रॉस रिलीजन, अक्रॉस क्लास, कास्ट बहुत हाई हैं, है ना? तो जस्ट कुछ 2-3 महीने पहले एक मुस्लिम लड़की थी जिसने अपना फोन ऑन करके एक वीडियो बना के उसके बाद उसने सुसाइड कमिट कर लिया था. उस वीडियो में उसने ये कहा कि उसके जो हस्बैंड थे उसे डाउरी के लिए बहुत परेशान कर रहे थे. उसने ये प्रॉब्लम अपने पेरेंट्स को भी बताया था, लेकिन पेरेंट्स ने उसे काउंसल किया कि किसी तरह शादी अपनी शादी बचाने की कोशिश करो, राइट? और उसने ये कहा था कि डाउरी की वजह से, अल्दो डाउरी दी गई थी, उसके बावजूद जो हस्बैंड था वो ज्यादा डाउरी मांग रहा था, तो उसकी वजह से उसने सुसाइड कमिट कर लिया. और ऐसे बहुत सारे केसेस हैं. बहुत अमीर खानदानों में भी ये केसेस दिखे जाएंगे और गरीब खानदानों में भी ये केसेस दिखते हैं. सो इफ वी ट्राई टू अप्लाई बाबा साहब्स अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑन इट, दिस अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ endogamy and caste system, we'll understand कि why society is paying dowry, why each caste is paying dowry. अब बहुत सारी कास्ट हैं महाराष्ट्र में जहाँ पे वो लोग डाउरी नहीं लेते हैं, बट बाकी इंडिया में ये डाउरी का प्रॉब्लम बहुत ज्यादा है. सो डाउरी कब दी जाती है, कब देनी पड़ती है? लार्जली देयर इज अ लिंक बिटवीन एंडोगेमी, caste and dowry. The anxiety to find a suitable groom is primarily rooted in finding a groom from one's own caste group. Endogamy plays a significant part in the dowry deaths, as the rush to find a groom of the same caste results in creating a marketplace where prices rise according to qualifications of the group, right? So क्या है, dowry generally उस society में ज़्यादा देनी पड़ती है जहाँ पे caste विद इन कास्ट मैरिजेस होते हैं. सो अगर कोई अभी बहुत सारी लड़कियां मना करती हैं डाउरी देने से, बट लार्जली बहुत सारी लड़कियों के पास इतना पावर नहीं होता है कि वो डाउरी देने से मना करेंगे. एंड ये केस नॉर्थ में तो बहुत ज्यादा आपको दिखने को मिलेंगे. सो why is the need for giving a dowry generally is because if the parents do not give a dowry, they will fail to find a groom from their own caste and from their own subcaste, and therefore they will have to find a groom from another caste, and possibly from a caste which is lower than their own caste, and that will lead to the breaking or instability of the caste system, right? So then we see that अगर डाउरी दे दी, उसके बाद marriage जो है, the marriages which are based on dowry, they are actually based on a lucky draw system. If the husband after taking the dowry is good, then the girl will have probably a good life. If not, then the girl will suffer, right? And we have tremendous cases of dowry deaths. Now at least they are less in number. There was a period of time around in 1970s where uh, families used to actually come up with new ideas how to burn or how to kill the new bride if her family members are not giving dowry, right? So you see ki एलपीजी सिलेंडर्स के या केरोसिन सिलेंडर्स से जो डेथ्स होती थी पहले, राइट, विच यूज और यू विल सी अ लॉट ऑफ, इफ यू गो टू एनी emergency government emergency hospitals, and if you see critical care rooms, you will find a lot of cases of women with burns which are related to dowry cases, right? So marriage then actually becomes a lucky draw. If the girl gets lucky, then she will have a good life. If not, then she will have a very difficult future. The caste system designs its own ways of survival, and it is ruthless in its instinct for survival. But it is the lot of women that are its points of resurrection. So caste system again and again survives and strengthens itself on the oppression of women. Caste system thrives on the oppression of women, either be it through these dowry deaths or be it through custodial killings. Now, Baba Saheb's identification of caste system as the gateway, as the system's gates, was a genuine, unparalleled sociological understanding and insight that he had given. Do we have time, Purva ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, you can.
All right. So next I will come to this idea. Now I recently found Baba Sahab's writing in a newspaper that he used to publish by the name of Bahishkrut Bharat. Right. I think it used to come weekly, or it used to come weekly. Right. So in this Bahishkrut Bharat, Baba Sahib is actually talking. If you see Baba Sahib's scholarly works, they are around in 14 volumes. Besides those 14 volumes are also some writings like the Bahishkrut Bharat, the Prabuddha Bharat, these kind of writings which are a separate set. So he's writing about what Indian women should be doing, right? So at this time, that was a colonial period, and you see wherever these Britishers went, wherever the white people went, वो लोग क्या करते थे? वो लोग जिस भी, आप जानते हैं कि जो ब्रिटिशर्स थे उन्होंने ऑलमोस्ट हाफ द ग्लोब को रूल किया है. उन्होंने जाके बहुत सारी कंट्रीज में अपना कब्जा किया था और बहुत सारे सालों तक उनको रूल किया है. तो जब ये जो ब्रिटिशर्स थे, जब ये इंडिया में आए, तो इन्हें कुछ चीजें चाहिए थी जिस वजह से ये लोग, कोई रीजंस चाहिए थे जिस वजह से ये लोग कह सके कि भाई हम लोग आप पे रूल कर रहे हैं, और ये रूल, जो शासन हम लोग आप पे कर रहे हैं, ये आपके लिए भी अच्छा है. So what these Britishers would do, they would identify certain practices, and they would say that, see, these practices in your society are barbaric, you are not civilized people, आप दकियानुसी लोग हो, आप बैकवर्ड लोग हो, आप में कोई सिविलिटी नहीं, आप सिविलाइज्ड लोग नहीं हो, और हम लोग आप पे इसीलिए रूल कर रहे हैं ताकि हम लोग आपको सिविलाइज्ड बनाएं, हाँ, ताकि आप एक सभ्य समाज बन सको. So at that time Britishers used this logic to rule many countries. Now which these countries are identified as third world countries or developing countries, right? So during this 19th century, social reformers actually concentrated a lot of their effort on improving the lot of women, right? Practices like sati, child marriage, child widowhood, enforced widowhood, all of these were constantly attacked by social reformers, Indian social reformers as well, because they identified Indians as a regressive race, right? So these kind of practices, we also see that Raja Ram Mohan Roy, along with the help of the British, he worked very hard to stop the practice of sati, right? And Raja Ram Mohan Roy was an upper caste, upper class, English educated man who really worked hard for the removal of sati as a practice. Now, this kind of practices, they actually brought shame to the Indian social reformers, and it made them, anxious in front of the colonial masters, right? Because the colonial masters would easily say कि आप लोग तो तकियानुसी हो, आपकी सोसाइटी तो बहुत बैकवर्ड है, रिग्रेसिव है, इसीलिए हम लोग आप पे रूल कर रहे हैं ताकि हम लोग आपको एक सभ्य समाज बना सके. Right. The Indian woman was an important site of reform for rupturing the colonial narrative of the uncivilized natives. Therefore, a reformation initiative which focused on modernizing the Indian women and restoring them to the former glory of the Vedic era was underway. Now, you would have heard that, a lot of history textbooks also say that during the Vedic period, Indian women or Hindu women lived an equal life, or they had a glorious history, right? They had more rights in the Vedic period as compared to now. So, a lot of social reformers wanted to bring back that kind of women's empowerment that was mentioned in the old texts to the contemporary period in the 19th century. The Indian male reformers agreed that the new Indian woman needed to be literate and educated, as this would transform the domestic and conjugal domain of the Indian household. Now, you see, this is also a period, the colonial period. We see ki Savitri Bai Phule, she starts to Savitri Bai Phule along with Jyotiba Phule and Fatima Sheikh, all of these three, they start to work and build schools for women, right? So they are the ones who build the first school for girls, and in India. And by the time, by Baba Sahib's time also, this emphasis on women's education was put. A lot of importance was given to women's education, but there were still questions, right? कि ठीक है, विमेन को अगर एजुकेशन देते हैं, पहला क्वेश्चन तो ये है कि उन्हें किस किस्म का एजुकेशन दिया जाए. क्या उन्हें साइंस पढ़ाया जाए, क्या उन्हें गणित पढ़ाया जाए, क्या उन्हें इंग्लिश या कोई लैंग्वेजेस पढ़ाया जाए, उन्हें लिखना पढ़ाया जाए, उन्हें पढ़ना पढ़ाया जाए, और कोई सब्जेक्ट्स हैं क्या कि जो उन्हें पढ़ाए पढ़ाए जाने चाहिए, या उन्हें होम क्या कहते हैं, होम मेकिंग के कोर्सेस करवाने चाहिए, राइट? ये सारे क्वेश्चंस थे, क्योंकि एक बड़ा क्वेश्चन ये भी था कि एजुकेशन लेने के बाद महिला क्या करे. एक आइडिया ये भी था कि अगर महिला ज्यादा पढ़ लिख लेती है तो वो घर को बर्बाद करेगी, बट उस वक्त ज्यादा एम्फोसिस ये था कि विमेन को इस तरीके का एजुकेशन दो जिससे वो घर को बर्बाद ना करे, बल्कि घर चलाने में उसकी मदद हो. तो बेसिक मैथमेटिक्स, जिससे उसे समझ आए कि भाई अगर कपड़े इस्त्री में दिए हैं तो कितने दिए हैं और वापस कितने मिले हैं. अगर एक कपड़ा इस्त्री करने के 2 रुपए हैं तो 10 कपड़े इस्त्री करने के कितने रुपए होंगे. तो इस तरीके की बजटिंग औरतें कर पाए, लिख पाए, पढ़ पाए. अगर न्यूज़पेपर आता है तो कोई अगर आता है, अगर कोई किसी उनके हस्बैंड अगर उन्हें कोई मीटिंग में ले जाने या ब्रिटिशर्स के साथ पार्टी में ले जा रहे हैं, तो बेसिक कॉन्वर्जेशन वो कर पाए किताबों के बारे में इंग्लिश में. सो दीज वर द एंजाइटीज. दूसरी एंजाइटी ये थी कि इन वीमेन कहाँ तक पढ़ने देना चाहिए. क्या स्कूल तक ही पढ़ने देना चाहिए, या उन्हें यूनिवर्सिटी तक भी जाने की अनुमति देनी चाहिए, यूनिवर्सिटी में भी किस किस्म के कोर्सेज होने चाहिए. फिर एक सवाल जो कंटिन्यूसली आता रहा कि क्या कोएड एजुकेशन, विमेन एंड मेन स्टडिंग टुगेदर, is it harmful to the society, or is it beneficial to society, or is it just neutral, right? So a lot of social reformers, they although supported women's education, did not support co-ed education, right? Because they said that if there is co-ed education, then it will ruin or corrupt the morality of people. We'll come to that point again, right? So these kind of anxieties were there. Now, a lot of social reformers and a lot of magazines that came for women's empowerment at that time, that was a time where a lot of magazines and newspapers used to be published, right? So the printing press was introduced in India, and it was made use of by the social reformers as well. So there were a lot of magazines that were printed for the reading, to be read by the Indian women, educated Indian women, and largely these were upper class, middle class Indian women, right? And these kind of magazines were largely seen in the Hindi belt, Maharashtra, and Bengal, and periodicals like Grah Lakshmi, स्त्री दर्पण, आर्य महिला, और कुछ नॉवेल्स भी थे। गृह लक्ष्मी करके एक नॉवल थी, रामानीर कर्तव्य करके एक नॉवल थी। रामानीर कर्तव्य का मतलब ड्यूटीज ऑफ वीमेन, राइट? गृह लक्ष्मी मतलब लक्ष्मी ऑफ द हाउस। स्त्री दर्पण विमेन्स मिरर। देन स्त्री सहित कठोपत कथन, कन्वर्सेशंस with the wife, Nari Dharm, women's duty. These kind of magazines and novels were published throughout the 1880s and 1920s, and they were published for women to read these magazines, right? So women would read, and women would understand that in the magazine it would be written what is the duty of the woman. तो काफी सारे आर्टिकल्स होते थे जिसमें विमेन को लिखा जाता था कि भाई आपके ससुराल में आपका क्या रोल होना चाहिए, आपकी क्या ड्यूटीज हैं, आपके पति के प्रति आपकी क्या ड्यूटीज होनी चाहिए, आपको किस तरीके का व्यवहार रखना चाहिए, आपको अपने बच्चों को किस तरीके की शिक्षा देनी चाहिए। तो इस किस्म के पब्लिकेशंस काफी कॉमन थे, एंड ये कॉमन इसीलिए भी थे बिकॉज एजुकेशन आया था, बट अ लॉट ऑफ सोशल रिफॉर्मर्स did not want women to get educated and act or become western in their thinking, right? So these kind of magazines were very popular. The discourses in these publications constructed the new Indian housewife. So that after education, the new Indian housewife was imagined. And what was that new Indian housewife? She should be able to read and write, right? And she should read, and she should actually make use of this education in improving her home. She should not waste her life in gossiping or talking with other women, or reading literature which is not related to homemaking, or wasting time in dressing up or doing makeup, and these kind of things would be written in the magazines. Basically, social reformers did not want that women should get a western modern outlook, right? So a lot of care was taken that household and how these duties should be mentioned in these books. Now, if we see, Baba Sahib had written an article in his paper, Marathi newspaper, Bahishkrit Bharat, on 15th July 1927. So 1927 में बाबा साहब ने एक आर्टिकल लिखा था जिसमें उन्होंने ये कहा कि महिलाओं के लिए जो एजुकेशन दिया जा रहा है वो एजुकेशन एक्चुअली उनके सोशल डेवलपमेंट के लिए होना चाहिए, ना कि उन्हें ये बताने के लिए कि वो कितनी अच्छी गृह लक्ष्मी बन सकती है. सो ही वाज अगेंस्ट glorifying women as Graha Lakshmis. Graha Lakshmi, what is the concept? Lakshmi of the house, right? That औरतें घर के अंदर ही शोभा देती है, ये जो कॉन्सेप्ट था, बाबा साहब इस कॉन्सेप्ट को नहीं मानते थे, और उन्होंने इसके बारे में एक आर्टिकल में उल्लेख भी किया था. And he critiqued this domestication of the Hindu women, and he said that these kind of ideas where women should be domesticated and should not have a role in the outside society, it also keeps them away from their basic rights. What are the basic rights? Rights to property, rights to education, and these kind of rights, right? So he said, he positioned his critique of the domesticity of Hindu women on the issue of lack of rights. So there is his article text in Marathi. I'll read that quote. माणूस समजून तिला कोणत्याच प्रकारचे हक्क हिंदू धर्मात देण्यात आलेले नाहीत. जड जीवाची जोपासना करण्यास संपत्तीचा वारसा तिला नाही तो नाहीच, पण शिक्षण घेऊन मन सुसंस्कृत करण्याचा अधिकारही तिला नाही. These are words of Baba Sahib. What does he basically mean? The woman does not have the right to live like a human being. Even now, she does not have the right to inherit her property or take and thereby take care of herself. So woman was continuously dependent, first on her father, then her husband. If husband died, then on her son, right? So she did not have the right to take care of herself. Neither does she have the right to get an education so that she could enrich her mind. In this issue of Bahishkrit Bharat, Baba Sahib spoke to his audience from the vantage point of his knowledge of what was happening across the globe in the women's movement. Now, if you see, this was also a period, although it was a period, the colonial period was a period of Indian independence, but at the same time, in developed nations like US, UK, and various other nations, if you see, women were actually fighting for their rights to work, fighting for their, they were collectivizing together, they were fighting for their rights to vote, जिसे suffrage movement कहते हैं. So through this article we come to know कि Baba Sahib was also very much aware of what kind of women's movement are happening across the globe, right? So he was a social reformer and a leader who was aware of what kind of progress and development and debates are happening in other societies with regards to women. So in this article, Baba Sahib talks about women's movement of suffrage, labor, pay, education that were happening in different continents of the world. For instance, like America, Europe, Turkey, China. Baba Sahib mentions these countries. So we can safely assume that Baba Sahib closely watched the unfolding of the global women's movement of the 20th century. In this issue, he further addressed societal anxieties around three issues. So there were other also problems that he highlighted in this newsletter that he had written. One is women's participation in the workforce. Baba Sahib was a advocate of women participating in the workforce and not just being relegated to the domestic sphere, right? Second issue that he talks about is women's education and co-education, and he took a stand in supporting women's co-education also, right? So when Baba Sahib is talking about women's entry into the workforce, it is around the 19th century and industrial revolution has happened, right? In the West, industrial revolution हो चुका है, जिसके वजह से जो वेस्टर्न कंट्रीज हैं, स्पेशली इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन बिगिन हुआ ब्रिटेन में. तो ब्रिटेन में जो फ्यूडलिस्टिक सिस्टम था, जो राजा होता था, राजा के बाद कोई नोबल मैन होते थे, उनका एग्रीकल्चरल लैंड होता था और लोग उस एग्रीकल्चरल लैंड पे काम करते थे. तो देयर वाज अ शिफ्ट फ्रॉम एग्रीकल्चरल इकोनॉमी टू इंडस्ट्रियल इकोनॉमी. नई नई टेक्नोलॉजीज इजाद हुई थी ब्रिटेन में, और उसकी वजह से फैक्ट्री सिस्टम आ गए थे. अब फैक्ट्री सिस्टम आ गए थे तो इसका मतलब पहले लोग जहां काम करते थे और जहां रहते थे वो एरिया सेम ही होता था, घर और खेत आसपास ही होते थे. फैक्ट्री सिस्टम जब आने लगा इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन के बाद, तो घर एक अलग जगह होता था और फैक्ट्री में काम करना एक अलग जगह होता था. फैक्ट्री कहीं अलग जगह होती थी और फैक्ट्री में काम करने के कुछ स्टिप्यूलेटेड आवर्स थे. पहले जैसे आज हम लोग 9 to 5 जॉब करते हैं, 7-8 घंटा काम करते हैं, पहले करीब 12 से 20 घंटा आपको काम या 12-15 घंटा जितना भी आपको काम करना होता था और फिर घर जाना होता था. सो ये इंडस्ट्रियल रिवोल्यूशन की वजह से दुनिया में बहुत सारे चेंजेस आने लगे, और एक चेंज ये भी आने लगा कि विमेन जो थी ऑल अराउंड वर्ल्ड वर्कफोर्स या फैक्ट्रीज में उनको काम करने की अनुमति मिलने लगी, या एक किस्म की कंडीशन इस तरीके से पैदा हो गई थी कि women had to enter the workforce, right? Consequently, the working hours of women were reduced so that they could handle domestic responsibilities. Okay, just one. In the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution had compelled individuals to adopt new modes of survival. The home space was separated from the workspace. The family structure, even in the West, it was going through a lot of change. They used to live, if they were living in a joint family, they also had to shift into a nuclear family. A lot of migration was happening from rural areas to urban areas, right? And women were entering factories. These changes had a profound impact on the Western society, as the entry of women into paid workforce raised concerns about who would care for children and the home. So if women are going to work, who is then going to take care of the children at home, and who is going to cook for the family? So looking at these concerns, even in West, women's working hours were reduced, right? But it also meant not just women's working hours were reduced, women had to go back and at the domestic responsibilities and raise children. However, when women were working in the factories, their payment was comparatively less to men, right? Because it was a belief that women are not capable of doing as much hard work as men are capable of doing. So women were paid less even in the Western countries. Now, when Britishers came, you know that cities like Bombay, Kolkata, and Surat, these cities were actually Britishers. They invested in these cities, especially Bombay or Mumbai is known as the workers' city. बहुत सारे factories वहाँ पे set up किए गए, and men and women both used to go there to work. And at that time, there was also the coal mines where Britishers used to take these coals and run their economy. So the work conditions in the coal mines were terrible, right? So Baba Sahib actually brought in a lot of rules and regulations to work in these factories, right? So Baba Sahib states that no one objected when and uh, uh, there was also a debate that should women in India also be allowed to join the paid workforce? Should women join the go to work in the factory system? To this argument, Baba Sahib said that, if you see India, India is a caste-based society. Now, a lot of people, because of the coming of Britishers, lot of men are doing the kind of work which is not equal to their caste. So a lot of Brahmins are doing work of accountants, possibly. A lot of Vaishyas are actually teaching in some university or becoming lawyers. So men have easily transgressed to an extent the boundaries of caste and occupation. So why should women be stopped from entering the workforce and should be objected to entering the workforce? So, for instance, he says Shudras were competing with the Brahmins to become professors. Therefore, women's entry into the workforce should not be objected either, as this added competition would actually diversify the talent pool and benefit the nation. So it was Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar who also advocated for women's entry into the public sphere of modern labor. Before the Britishers came, India actually worked on ritual labor, right? There was caste labor. You do what people were supposed to do, the job that was allocated to them on the basis of their caste, which was on the basis of their birth, right? So ritual labor. And you might be paid in money or you might be paid in goods, right? Either people would get food or whatever. With the coming of the Britishers, there was also a major shift where modern labor started to come into context, where people would actually be paid in money as well as in terms of benefits for the job that they were doing, right? And this job was not ritual duty, it was not related to one's caste, and therefore it was not a moral duty, a caste based moral duty, but it was modern labor that people would go to an area, work in the factory, get paid for the days that they worked, get not paid for the works for the days that they were absent. So Baba Sahib, when he advocated that women should also be allowed to enter the workspace, he was advocating for women's entry into modern labor. And in this way, we also see that he redefined gendered labor within the modern caste society to an extent, right? So he changed the nature of gendered labor when he advocated that women should participate in workforce outside of the house. In his later life, Baba Sahib advocated for the Mines Maternity Benefit Act, which was enacted across India between 1942 to 1956. So women used to actually work. Women were employed in these coal mines, and also because उनको कम पैसा दिया तो कुछ बोलते भी नहीं थे और चलता भी था, तो women used to be employed there, and the working conditions were very dangerous, right? So Baba Sahib brought in this Maternity Benefit Act, where he said that because the working conditions in the coal mines were very dangerous, pregnant women should be given leave during their pregnancy period, right? And they should be paid leave. They should not suffer because they are undergoing pregnancy. And he said that this they should be given a right during the pregnancy and after childbirth also, and it should be a paid leave, and the money should be provided by the employer, by the company in which these women are working. He principled the bill on the fact that rest is a necessity for the mother during the pregnancy and after the pregnancy, right? And he also said that this is also in the best interest of the nation to pass this bill. uh, okay. So he further added that he was also in support of imposing a liability of maternity benefit on the employer because they earn a profit from underpaying the women as compared to men, and thus they should not be allowed to escape from the responsibility of paying women during their maternity leave. Do we have time?
Yes, ma'am.
Purva ma'am? Okay.
Uh,
How much more time?
5 minutes.
Right. So I will actually jump to the conclusion then.
Yeah.
Right. So there are actually various aspects to discuss about Baba Sahib's contribution to women's rights, and 40 minutes or even 1 2 hours are not enough. So I will just jump to this aspect where he advocated for. He brought in the Hindu Code Bill, which was in favor of all the Hindu women, and he asked for few things specifically in the Hindu Code Bill. What was that? One was when he drafted the bill, he introduced crucial changes in the Hindu law, right? And these changes would then empower the Hindu women to a great extent. What did the bill sought to do? Firstly, the bill sought to give half of parents' property to the daughter. Now, also, you see, a lot of women are not keen in taking their parents' property, right? If the parents or the brother is ready to give the property, then they will take. But generally, women are very hesitant in asking for the parents' property. What happens is, if the women generally it is there, if the women ask the parents' property, then probably she will be boycotted by the family, or the brother will stop talking to her, and they're fearing all of these, women are hesitant to ask for the property. But Baba Sahib had emphasized that women should legally be allowed to take half of their parents property. Daughters should be given that permission. Secondly, the Hindu Code Bill sought to convert women's limited estate into full estate. The kind of property rights that women had were limited at that time, right? So after the woman, if the husband dies, then the property that was in the woman's name would go to some man in the family who is the husband's next relative. So the property was never in the women's name. So he sought to convert this women's limited estate into full estate. Earlier, women were given limited rights to the estate where they could not dispose it according to their will. Instead, the estate was returned to the family members of her husband. Thirdly, the bill abolished caste in marriage and adoption, which meant that the bill actually allowed for intercaste marriages to happen and allowed for people to adopt children from any of the castes, not their own specific caste. Fourthly, the bill introduced the principle of monogamy, where and for men, right? Monogamy for women was anyways a given. The bill introduced the principle of monogamy, as men at that time were permitted to marry more than one woman. Fifthly, divorce was introduced for both men and women who wished to opt out of the marriage. Lastly, divorced wives could claim maintenance from their husbands, while the Hindu law did not permit for maintenance of a wife who was living separately from her husband. However, you see these 5, 6 changes that Dr. Ambedkar had suggested or was trying to bring in through the Hindu Code Bill, they were vehemently opposed by the right wing of the society, and not just by men but also by various women, right? So there were orthodox patriarchs like Thakur Bhagwan Das, Pandit Lakshmi Kanta Maitra, Naziruddin Ahmed, all of these who opposed the bill, right? Because there was a feeling among the Orthodox Hindus that these clauses on intercaste marriage, monogamy, divorce, and property rights were not feasible and were not a good thing for the Indian society. To an extent, even Sarojini Naidu was one of the opponents of this Hindu Code Bill, and she actually sat on a hunger strike for withdrawal of this bill. So what happened earlier? Nehru was actually liberal in his stance, and he showed some support for the bill. And later on, with the growing pressure of the orthodox people in society, he withdrew his support, and the bill was withdrawn. Right? It was not passed. But Dr. Ambedkar maintained his stand amidst the opposition, and at the cost that he was called as the modern Manu. Manusmriti is written by one of the sages, Manu, and it is a document which is ambiguous on women's rights. Rather, it is derogatory to the women. But because Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar had come up with this Hindu Code Bill, a lot of orthodox people started to call him the modern Manu, which is a contradiction, right? So as a protest, Baba Sahib also resigned from his position, because this bill he believed was very important for the empowerment and upliftment of Hindu women. And because this bill was killed slowly, therefore he did not want to continue with his position as the law minister, and he resigned. So just if you see, there are of course various other things, but the kind of what I emphasize is that जो women's movement या नारीवादी चळवळ जी राहिलेली आहे, it has not recognized the efforts and contribution that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar has done for women's empowerment. Even today you see there is a bit of change. Even government is talking about Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar and celebrating Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar across India. But there was a time where people would not take his name, right? People would not take him seriously. People would relegate him to as just a Dalit leader. Now, the change that has happened, even some websites, you see women's website, Feminism in India, and all of these websites are actually uh, considering the contributions that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar has made. But what I argue in this paper is that these contributions are actually the name and the work of Babasaheb Ambedkar has been continuously highlighted by the Dalit women, and they are the ones who are actually taking forward the agenda of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. And it is high time that even the mainstream feminist movement of India starts to take the agenda of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar forward in a positive way, if we have to see any concrete changes happening in terms of women's rights and women's empowerment in today's India. Thank you so much.
Soumya?
Thanks a lot, ma'am, thanks a lot, ma'am, for taking us through the feminist legacy of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. It was indeed a pleasure listening to you. If anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat box.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir.
I can hear
you.
Can I speak, madam? Hello.
Yes, so you can
You
ask
have a
question.
question?
No, I would like to ask one question, madam.
Yes.
Can I ask, madam?
Yes, sir, please go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, madam. Madam, in the era of privatization policy by government, what will be the scope for women's participation in improving the gender equality and you said that participation should increase. So it is very important point. Due to privatization, the participation of women is decreasing, and the private industries are of low higher caste people, and they are not joining or they are not resuming the jobs for lower caste women. So what is your suggestion or what you advise in this present scenario, please, madam?
Thank you, sir. Was it Sunil, sir?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
Thank you, sir. Sir, very important question, and I am I'm not actually somebody who can give a suggestion, but if we link that, yes, privatization is happening, and largely it is also reducing the reservation of women as well as of Dalits in the workspace. Now, reservation is generally taken as a bad word, right? But what is it? It is basically representation. So with privatization, representation is actually reducing in society. Now there are also demands for bringing reservation within the private sector, so that there will be a representation of all societies in the workspace. Now, sir, importantly, I think that again, with this kind of shift that is happening in the economy, it is a structural shift, and the women's movement actually needs to address this kind of shift, because it is about rights. If I see the contemporary women's movement, it is limited to unfortunately, though these issues are also very important, the issues of sexuality, the issues of my body, my right, these kind of discourses are very very important. But the feminist movement, like I see, the mainstream feminist movement has moved away from structural issues about how women will participate in the larger workforce. Will it only be the question, will it only be a space for upper caste women, or will it also have marginalized women? So I actually don't have an answer for this question, but it is a broader question that the movement has to think about. Even when you see in private sector,
Yes. Thank you,
Baba
madam.
Sahib talked about maternity leaves much before, and even now some private sectors are not ready to give maternity leave.
Yes,
So there
madam.
is
Yes,
a
madam.
need to revisit Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar's ideology. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, madam.
Any other person who wants to ask a question, please put them into the chat box. Or you can speak as well if there's any question.
I think the students are very shy, or maybe they slept off. Law students, oh yeah, you have a lot of questions. I was very scared कि I have to come and speak to law students.
Very logical.
Yeah, you never know how law students will, आप कैसे चाबी घुमा देते हैं पता नहीं चलता है.
Hello, Dr. Patil ma'am.
Yes.
I am Dr. Pramod Hirode,
Yes, sir.
the principal of this college. I really indebted
Yes.
that you responded positively to our invitation and delivered a very informative lecture for a student on the occasion of Dr. Ambedkar birth anniversary. Really, you have touched two very important issues. See, everyone knows that it is Raja Rammohan Rai who took initiative for abolition of sati practice in India. But you have referred to very important is what is the nomenclature for him, that British educated high upper caste elite class person. So this is very important. This is very important. At the same time, you have also referred that the practice of sati was predominantly restricted to so high caste societies. So these issues are very important to understand now. And again, we'll have to do the collective efforts for abolition of such all practices. But unfortunately, it is that what you refer to, that in North India, still some deliberate efforts are being made to reborn the such practices, and in the form of erecting or constructing the temple, peoples are now again getting attracted towards the sati and all the things. This must not happen because we, being Indian now, are in a process of progress, in process of development, in process of civilization, and our whole journey in future must be towards that destination. But again, some forces are coming, putting in hurdles in our way of progress. Thank you so much for your informative speech delivered on this occasion. Thank you. I
Thank you,
do,
sir. It was an honor to get invited.
we do expect your same cooperation in future. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It was an honor.
So, Soumya, over to you, Soumya.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I would now like to call Gauri Deshpande to deliver the vote of thanks.
Cheerful afternoon, one and all. Now we come to an end of this lively gathering. Prior to winding it up, I would like to express a few words of warmth to all of you. Firstly, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to you, ma'am, the speaker of the day, Dr. Prachi Patil. Thank you, ma'am, for your gracious words, which will indeed help us. Thank you for acquainting us with women empowerment, the history of women in India. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the principal of the college, Dr. Pramod Herode, and all the teachers for guiding us to make this event a great success. Lastly, I would like to thank all the students for being such an amazing audience. It wasn't be possible without you all to make this event a great success. Thank you all once again.
Thank you, Gauri.
Okay, thank you, Prachi. Thank you so much.